This story happened a few years ago. I was in my early 20s and was studying in Paris, France. I was going home from uni. I usually took a short bus ride and walked the rest of the way. That day I felt slightly uncomfortable. I could sense some guy looking intensely at me. I was used to unpleasant, unsolicited gazes, but this time, his gaze felt beastly. It's hard to explain why, but I felt like a prey being stalked. I decided to get off the bus a few stops early. I wanted to avoid him and didn't want him to see where I usually got off. Like I learned in the movies, I waited until someone else pressed the stop button and waited until the last moment to stand up and leave. I didn't notice him getting off the bus. Just as I was feeling the relief of having escaped an uncomfortable situation, I looked over my shoulder, and there he was, a few meters behind. I had the distressing feeling his eye had just looked away the moment I turned. I walked into a shop, took my phone and pretended to be taking a call. I couldn't see him anymore. I exited and made my way at home as fast as I could. I kept looking back in the busy street. I zigzagged across the street at every cross. Finally, I believed that him getting off at the same stop as me was just a coincidence. When I reached my building, I looked back one last time, and there he was, his alarming gaze on me, smirking. I ran up to my apartment, climbing the stairs 4 at a time. I reached the top floor, squeezed through my door, locked it, and froze. My intercom was ringing. Though I asked me why I picked it up, I regretted it the moment I did. I could hear the opposite, flat intercom ringing as well. He had pressed all the buttons one by one, hoping someone would open. But now, he knew my name. Gabrielle. Oh shit, I felt like a deer in the headlights. Frozen. Open the door. Please, said a pleading voice. I just want to talk to you. Somehow I couldn't move or speak. Come to the window, he added. Look at me. You'll see I'm not a bad guy. Something clicked. He wanted to locate my apartment in the building. I was not going to make that mistake. I hung up in shock. I waited by the door without moving for what seemed like hours. When I finally managed to calm myself, I called my long-distance boyfriend. Call the police, he said immediately. Why didn't I call the police? I don't know. Today it would have been the first thing I would do. The fear of making a big deal out of something not important, perhaps. What an idiot I was. I called my best friend instead. I didn't want to feel alone. I told her all about it, and after a while I felt better. Safe. We started laughing. Suddenly the intercom rang again. 2 hours had passed since I'd come home. I answered. Gabrielle, said the voice. Open. Please. I still remember the chills I felt. He was still there. He was there all this time. I was silent. Petrified. He was silent, but I could sense his trepidation. Gabrielle, let me in. I'm so thirsty, he said. Just give me a glass of water. This broke the tension. I hung up, curled up in a corner, literally in recovery position, terrified. I waited. I was too scared to make a sound. I knew he couldn't hear me from the hall, but I was scared to even breathe. The intercom rang again and again. I didn't answer this time. I crouched to the sofa and fell asleep in exhaustion. I heard the intercom ring one more time in the middle of the night. I woke up in the morning, afraid to leave my apartment. I called my dad, who came to pick me up. There was no one in the hall, but there was a note in my mailbox. Gabrielle, I'm a nice guy. You should have opened to me. We immediately went to the nearest police station. The police listened and of course told me that I should not hesitate to call them. My dad called a locksmith to install digicode on the building door the same day and wrote a message to each of my neighbors asking to not open the door to anyone they didn't expect. He sat in the cafe in front of my building with 2 friends every evening for more than a week. We never saw the stalker again. After this episode, I used a different route to and from uni every day. I kept my phone tightly in my hand and looked back every few meters. Today I am still observing of my surroundings. I never answer the door if I'm not expecting someone. So, people, if you ever find yourself in any kind of uncomfortable situation, call the police. Don't be an idiot like me. Be safe, everyone. That's where your body will be within half an hour. I was raised in a fairly strict but loving Christian household in a Bible Belt section of the States. My parents weren't at all unreasonable in their rules and were well-intentioned, but I broke a few along the way like most teenagers do. The summer before I started college, I began a relationship with a slightly older guy. I knew him from high school, and he was attending the college I would soon be at. Johnny was a cat. She was exceptionally handsome, had been on the football team, and was on a full academic scholarship. Funny, talented, and very personable. There was little to not like about him. We bonded over our teetotalism and love of pranking. The best part, he had his own apartment at the college, which was a 4-hour drive from my parents' house. I could easily sneak up there under the guise of visiting one of my other friends or spending the night at a local girlfriend's house. My parents didn't even know I had a boyfriend. Now I just turned 18, was enjoying my rebellious streak and newfound freedom, but I was still happily lived under my parents' guidance and rules for a large part. They always encouraged me to be a free thinker and to ultimately figure out my own morals and values, and I ended up much like them, because they're honestly that awesome. My mom wisely encouraged me not to just sleep with anyone, and it was something I actually held to quite strongly, so while I had no qualms having sleepovers with my boyfriend, I was intent of not having sex with him. He took it pretty well and seemed to respect my decision. One week, smack dab in the middle of summer, I had 3 days off in a row at work. I drive up to see Johnny was in order, and I began my travel early in the morning. He was excited to see me, and we had a great day. Nerf gun wars, Regan Stephen King, making out. We went out for dinner and returned for a night of shenanigans, or so I thought. Upon entering his apartment, Johnny produced a box of condoms. He had tried this before, so I wasn't fazed, and adamantly told him I wasn't happening. The events that unfolded following this seemingly unimportant interaction still haunt me to this day. Johnny's smile disappeared and his eyes went cold. Hauntingly cold. I was sitting at his dining room table with my back against the wall. He was standing at the other end of the small table. You make me sick. I'm sick of you. You play me. All you do is play me. We were serial pranksters and sarcastic at every sense of the word. While his countenance made my skin crawl, I knew he was joking. I had known Johnny for years, after all. I've thought about this for a long time, and you're dead. I'm not doing this anymore. You make me so sick. I hate you. And you're dead. He was unnervingly calm, and his voice betrayed a slight hint of anger I'd never heard before. I noticed him clenching his fist, popped out veins tracing up his arm. For the first time in our entire relationship, I felt unsafe with him. He held my gaze unblinking. His second-floor apartment was on campus. It was summer. I had seen nobody else in the building, no other cars in the parking lot. Even if I could get past him, which I couldn't, my 2 options were unlocking the balcony door and jumping, or racing 15 feet down the hallway to the dead-bolted front door, which opened inwardly, and getting down a flight of stairs. Either scenario led to an empty parking lot. I would have to get to my car or run into the woods nearby. While athletic, I had no chance against it physically. I focused on him. Half of me just knew he was kidding. He had to be. He'd break into laughter any second now, and he would return to our beautiful day. He continued talking. I can't repeat what he said. It was too graphic and specific to our location to write out in a public forum. He detailed the essay he had in store for me. If I survived, I'd be strangled in the nearby woods that carted off and dumped at a secluded spot we had explored together. He motioned to some bags he had on this counter. That's where your body will be within an hour. I had enough. His plan was too well thought out to be impromptu. I'm small, but I'm stubborn and would fight to the death if I had to. I also have a wicked straight face when I need to. It was my turn to hold his gaze with all the ferocity I could muster. I stood up and said the first thing that came to mind. I'm still proud of the unflinching calm I presented. Inside I was begging God not to let me die. You're real funny. I almost believed you for a second. Wouldn't you have worked anyways? Because what I was gonna tell you before all that happened is my dad asked me to come home tonight. He needs help first thing in the morning with the garden for my mom's birthday because Kyle, my brother, hurt his back, and I told him I'd call him as soon as I was on the road within half an hour. It was a lie, and not a particularly good one, but the delivery was convincing. I dangled my phone in his face and told him he could explain to my dad why I wasn't coming home tonight if he wanted me to stay. Johnny's mouth was agape as he stared at me. I was just kidding, he mumbled, fist still clenched. See ya, I chirped, pushing past him. My gamble paid off. I grabbed my purse and shuffled down the hallway. I could feel his eyes burning through me and the electric energy in the room as I internally screamed at myself to move slowly. The deadbolt disengaged. I walked out and fought every urge to run down the stairs. I was too far from my car if he chased me to beat him, and I refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing me scared. I walked the entire length of the car park. I've always had a habit of parking as far out as possible, next to the woods he told me he would murder me in. I knew he was watching me the entire time. I could feel his eyes follow my every movement. As I drove out past his apartment, I saw his shadow in the balcony window. I waved. He stared. I drove a few miles to the nearest Walmart. It was only 8 and the sun was just starting to set. People milled through the parking lot, blissfully unaware of what I'd just gone through. I collapsed onto my steering wheel and broke down, bawling my eyes out. Then I drove the 4 hours back home. Stupidly, I didn't know how to process what happened and banished it to the recesses of my mind. I spent the next few years avoiding Johnny. The few times I thought about it, I blamed myself for being so naive. I finally told my mom 4 years after the fact and was able to process through it. So, possible murderer, ex-boyfriend who thankfully now lives about 10,000 miles away from me. Let's not meet again. The blood-curdling scream that woke me up at 3 a.m. It was Christmas time. My wife and I were staying at her childhood home where her mother now lived all alone. Well, not if you include the cats. Meow. The house was on a quiet cul-de-sac in the suburbs. If you're picturing freshly mowed lawns, American flags, and empty sidewalks, you're picturing it right. It's a single-story home with an attached garage out front. The garage has 2 doorways apart from the electric garage, of course. One leads to the garden and backyard. This had an old doggy door from their days with old dear Rip Max, that they covered with a piece of nailed-in wood. That had always made me slightly uncomfortable before, but I figured it had been that way for years, so what's the worst that could happen? The second door leads to the kitchen. Hollow core. It could stop a mouse, but not much else. Definitely not something that wanted in or someone. We are asleep in my wife's childhood bedroom at the front of the house. 3 a.m. I was in that deep, dark recess of sleep. You know, you're in the diving bell and you're submerged hundreds of meters below the surface in black water, protected from the real world by miles of nothingness. Then I heard it. The scream. What are you doing? It was my mother-in-law's voice echoing down the hallway. To me, lost in a sea of sleep, it sounded like a jet engine roaring past my eardrum. I bolted up. What happened next happened in a matter of seconds. But about that scream, even though I was dead asleep, I heard enough of it to sense an urgency behind it. This wasn't an, oh you scared me type of scream. This was different, and I knew it. Not consciously, but my lizard brain, that piece we retained from our primitive ancestors, knew something was wrong. I watch and read a fair amount of true crime, and this scream awakened that horrible fear. The one that says, this can't really be happening to me, can it? Honestly, in that second of the night, it sounded like someone was about to be murdered. You ever wonder if you're a fight or flight type of individual? I always have, and I came to know something about myself after this night. I'm a fighter. I leaped out of my bed, growled. Yes, growled in the manliest voice I could muster. I'm gonna kill you, motherfucker, and took off running. I tore open the bedroom door and ran into the hallway. There, at the end, I saw my mother-in-law, nightgown on, look of utter shock on her face. Standing still, we make eye contact as I continue towards her. Then she turns her head, looks directly into the kitchen. I hurry past her and round the corner into the kitchen. The hollow core door is obliterated, shards everywhere. I look through the open frame and see the electric garage door is open. I push ahead. As I run into the garage, I hear it. The sound of someone hopping into a running car just out of view. Just as I make it onto the driveway, I see a car peeling out from the sidewalk adjacent to the house. But the adrenaline is still pumping, and who am I to say no to adrenaline? So like an idiot I run, barefoot, after the car. I give a good go, but I'm no Michael Johnson, and even he couldn't catch a speeding car. It soon vanishes down the street, and I'm left all alone. The police showed up within 3 minutes, which I have to say makes me feel a lot more at ease with my mother-in-law living there. They took our statements. My mother-in-law said she heard a voice, or noise, in the hollow core door being kicked in, and walked into the kitchen where she encountered the burglar, a small framed woman. The police theorized she was working as part of a team. Her job was to squeeze through the doggy door, kick in the hollow core, and open the electric garage door for her accomplice. According to the police, the burglars most likely thought nobody was home. Fortunately, my mother-in-law must have caught her off guard and scared her, in addition to my manly growling, of course. But it feels good to know that everyone was safe, and to learn that I guess I've got a little fight in me. And for the record, We bought the heaviest goddamn wooden door you've ever seen to replace that hollow core. I'd like to see a mouse try and get through that. I'm the stalker. TV shows and movies usually depict abductors driving white or black vans. I didn't realize this until I decided to buy a white 1994 Dodge Ram cargo van to haul some of the gear I needed for work. While driving it, I've been pulled over by cops and searched 3 times for no reason, but that is another story. The point is, some people see vans as suspicious. One day while returning home, a woman pushing a stroller stared at me for a long time while I drove along my home street. We have speed bumps and I had a lot of expensive, delicate gear in the van, so I was driving very slow. She stared at me, wide-eyed, the entire time, so I smiled at her, like a friendly neighbor does. She was staring so intently, she almost walked the stroller right off the edge of the curb. I thought it was funny and almost forgot about it. A week later, our HOA email thread heats up when a resident sends out a notice that his wife and toddler were being stalked by a man in a white van. Fearing a pitchfork and torch mob mistaking me for the creeper, I replied to all, saying I live in the neighborhood and also drive a white van. I even provided my license plate number and home address. Big mistake. Jokingly, I added that I also witnessed a suspicious person in the neighborhood, a woman with a stroller who was staring at me for so long and hard it made me uncomfortable. I provided the date and time of the incident to see if their alleged stalker was actually me. It was. Dude got triggered. He started sending email after email, CCing everyone on the list, telling me he can read between the lines of what I was saying. His accusations became more and more ludicrous and turned into personal attacks. Several neighbors on the email list replied that he was behaving badly. The emails eventually stopped, but things got even weirder. On several occasions while out walking my dog, a 10-ish-year-old girl would come up out of her house, run over to me, awkwardly chat me up about my dog, and give me strangely intimate details of her life. I wondered why this child was talking to strangers, but thought maybe she would just knew me from the neighborhood, so I politely played along. Then one day the girl shows up at my house. She said that she was angry because her dad wouldn't let her have a dog like mine, so she wanted to visit my dog for a while. I told her I needed to talk to her parents before I could ever let her visit my home like this. She said okay and left, and I never saw her anymore. I have 2 daughters, and one of their friends told me the girl who was chatting me up is the daughter of the triggered dude from the HOA email list. He'd been sending her out to talk to me and taking pictures. My daughter's friend was friends with this bait girl. The poor girl's dad was making his own daughter uncomfortable, which is why she confided in her friend. The dad was sending her daughter out to chat with me so he could accuse me of I don't know what. One detail I forgot to mention. I have dash cams in all of my vehicles and CCTV monitoring my front door, so the initial incident with the wife as well as the girl coming to the door were recorded. I emailed the trigger dude and kindly offered him copies of the videos of each incident. I also told him I was concerned that his daughter was behaving inappropriately towards strangers. Apparently this scuttled his plan, and as I never talked to him again. Creepy kid who tried to get my 5-year-old to walk off with him at the park today. Okay, this just happened today and it really messed with me. I've been thinking about it all day long and all evening. I took my 5-year-old son and 3-month-old daughter to the playground today to meet a friend and her daughter. It's got regular playground equipment and a huge parking lot and a big grassy area and trees surrounding the play area. On the other side of the trees is some sort of development thing they're working on. The area the school is in is pretty rural. It's just a bunch of twisty roads and random buildings. I've never thought about it or noticed this until today. We get to the park and meet up with my friend. Another mom that we know is there with her 2 girls too. The only other people there is a dad with a little girl and a boy that look to be somewhere between 10 and 12. So the moms are all sitting, chatting, playing with my adorable daughter, having a good time. The kids are playing together, everything's good. Eventually all the kids from our group kind of wander off through the playground doing their own thing. The seesaws are in a shady area. Next to them is a big stretch of grass. Then the trees with the semi-developed area behind that. My son wants to seesaw but nobody wants to do it with him. I get up to go help him. Then the 10-ish-year-old boy comes over and says hi. do you want me to play with him? Which was a little strange that he asked me and not my son, but I just said, sure bud, go ahead. So he gets on the other side and starts seesawing with him. His demeanor was so strange, he didn't smile, his voice was completely flat, he didn't say a word to my son, he just seesawed with him. My son was oblivious and chatting away at him. After a few minutes I started walking back to my bench and I hear the boy start talking with my son. Okay, so maybe he's shy around grown-ups. I sit down and start talking to my friends and the dad walks near us to probably go up to his car and I say, hey, it was really sweet for your son to offer to play with mine and smile at him. He looks at me and goes, he's not my son. I don't know who he is. He walked over and asked if I wanted him to play with blank daughter's name. And then just kind of followed us around until you guys got here. He sort of laughed like, weird, right? And shook his head. I got a very uneasy feeling in my stomach and looked over to the seesaws. They're gone. I jump up, hand my daughter to my friend and run in that direction yelling my son's name. I see them walking almost to the trees. The trees are not close. I guess a football field or so away from the play area. I got this awful feeling and ran as fast as I could yelling my son's name. He turned around and started trying to walk to me, and the little boy grabs his arm and tries to pull him towards the trees. He gets upset and starts saying, hey, let go of me. Now usually this is not a quality about my son that brings me anything but trouble, but he does not like to be grabbed, pushed, or pulled, and he has ADHD, so when he gets frustrated it usually comes out in aggressive ways. I was so thankful for this today. He starts punching the boy and headbutting him like a little crazy person. The boy lets go as I get to them and runs to the trees. My friends are finally realizing something is going on, so they're standing at the edge of the play area, looking confused. My son's crying. I'm shaking. I don't know what the fuck just happened. I asked my son where he was going and he said his friend wanted to take him to see Ryan from Ryan Toys Reviews. It's his favorite YouTube channel and he talks about it non-stop. He told the boy about Ryan and apparently the boy told him that he knew where Ryan lived and did my son want to go visit and play? So of course my son said yes. I don't know what the intention was. He was a kid. I don't understand why he would lie to my son, why he wanted him to go into the woods, why he was so weird. Maybe it was innocent, but I just don't think it was. Edit. Just so everyone knows, I did call the police and report it this morning. I don't know how much good it did. They listened and asked me questions, but they didn't want me to come make a formal statement or anything. I'm gonna call the school tomorrow, too. Beware of small towns in Florida. This is a long time ago, late 90s. When I was 19, I moved from Oregon to Florida to be with my boyfriend at the time. Don't ever do that. I was thinking white sand beaches and Mickey Mouse, but instead I got the swamps, bugs, and dirt roads. It was a huge shock to the system. We lived in this dinky little town called Hawthorne just outside of Gainesville. Don't ever go there. Very small, one-stop light and 4 stores: Dollar General, Steve's Market, Eckerd's Pharmacy, and Sonny's BBQ. Whoopee. Anyway, I got a job at the now defunct Eckerd's in the middle of town. It was next to the grocery store, so everyone shopped there. After about 3 months or so of working there, I walked in to start my shift one day when the manager pulled me into his office. He laid out on his desk was about 30 to 40 open letters, all addressed by hand to me. Do you know this person? My manager asked. No. Read one. So I picked the cheerful yellow one. Inside were 2 handwritten letters and a magazine cut of a woman with long blonde hair, just like me. As the Eckerd manager watched on, I read the letter. I skipped around a lot of confusion, desperately trying to find out why I'm in this room. From what I read, it was mostly someone imagining what spending time with me would be like. A lot of it was S-word in nature. There were descriptions and comments about my hair, washing it, smelling it, and something about the moonlight. A few sentences were highlighted, others were underlined. My first thought was, am I getting fired? Do you know this David Eldrod? Hair? I said yes, I think so. The tall, lanky guy with thick glasses and frizzy dark blonde hair, the regular who comes in a couple times a week to pick up Diet Coke and medication for his mom. Late 20s and obviously socially or mentally challenged. On rare occasions he would make small talk as I rang up his soda. Once or twice he would linger at my register or stare at me, but I figured he was just trying to adjust his eyes or had some poor social cues. Harmless compared to some of the other people I'd met in Florida, so I didn't pay him any mind. Until that day in the Eckert's office, I knew he wrote the letters because of the strange encounter 2 weeks earlier. While working, he came up behind me and touched or caressed my hair. I had to remove it from my hands and he apologized. Weird, but no harm. I went back to work. After telling me, my manager this, he informed me that the customer was going to be banned from the store and I was being sent home while they worked up the details. What details? Confused, I walked out of the store and drove home. Strange. 2 hours after I got home from my non-shift at work, there's a knock at my door. I look out the windows and see what resembles a SWAT team. What the fuck? I saw men in tactical gear with large weapons, 2 men dressed in suits and several uniformed cops. In what seemed like slow motion at the time I opened the door, a female officer holds up a few odd familiar letters. Can we come in and talk to you about these? Realizing everyone in town has read the letters, I wanted to pass the fuck out. I don't even know the guy. We have a seat on my couch and she began to speak. Out of the corner of my eye I see my boyfriend shooting me dirty looks from the bedroom. The female officer mentions getting the letters from Eckers and attempting to issue a trespassing notice. They wanted to speak to him directly, she says, because her whole department is aware of David. The officers confronted him at his residence and attempted to evoke the trespassing notice from Eckerd's store. Apparently, he was not happy about this. He insisted for over 45 minutes how this was all a big mistake and I wanted to talk to him. He was so combative and persistent they decided to pursue stalking charges. Stalking charges? She continues. He needs to be aware that David killed and partially dismembered his mother when he was 12 years old. He was released from a juvenile psychiatric facility less than 4 years ago. Diet Coke. We found disturbing materials at his home. She continued. We believe he's been stalking you. My mind kept wandering. It's my mom's favorite drink. David was arrested the next day for stalking after he was found in the Eckert's parking lot, but the last official word was he went back to the psychiatric hospital, at least temporarily. I didn't have the chance to read the letters in full before they were entered into some vault of evidence, nor did they explain what they found at his house, so I never had the complete picture of what was happening. My boyfriend at the time was a huge dick about the whole thing, so I moved back to Oregon a week later. Besides, who wants to hang around when Norman Bates is fixated on you?